Hey everyone, welcome to the Career Journey Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany Avila. Today's episode was pretty exciting. We have psychotherapist Robert Jackman on, and his story went from being interested in psychology and wanting to do therapy related activities to deciding that he didn't really know how to get into that, didn't know what the right questions to ask were. And so he ended up going into a full-fledged successful career in marketing and traveled all around the United States, made a ton of money, and decided he wasn't quite fulfilled enough and wanted to go back to his psychology roots. And at that time, he knew better questions to ask and how to do it. And he talks all about this level of fulfillment and making sure that you're doing what you want to do and not just kind of going through the motions. So it's a very exciting story. He offers amazing advice for, again, how to seek that fulfillment, but also if you're interested in psychotherapy, kind of how to get into that world and how to get into doing some other things. He recently just wrote a book during the pandemic that's already available. And so it's just a fun ride to express how to figure out where you need to be and how sometimes that happens even after college. So without further ado, please enjoy Robert Jackman. Hey everyone, welcome to the Career Journey Podcast, where we explore exciting careers and how to get them from the people who've lived it. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany Avila. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So it's usually pretty straightforward because we just want to know your story, your career kind of trajectory. And I start at the very beginning. So did you have any career aspirations when you were a child?
You know, when I was a teenager, I really wanted to go into psychology, but I didn't really know what that meant.
Yeah.
And so I talked with some counselors, and then when I got into college, they said, okay, declare a major. And I said psychology, but I didn't really know what I was going to do with that. I think I wanted to study it for my own self. I
Yeah,
think I wanted to write. I think I wanted to figure out parts of me. But,
absolutely.
and I just went through and I took classes and I learned more about psychology. I learned more about me. Um, and then I I graduated, and my counselor at the time, my guidance counselor at school at Loyola, um, didn't really help prepare me. And so I said, so what can I do with this? And he said, well, can become a social worker, or you can go on and get a PhD. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to be a social worker,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't afford to go and get a PhD. And so it was this really kind of strange, like, okay, now I have this great degree, but not a whole lot of direction on how to use it.
Right. I feel that's
So,
pretty common of psychology majors.
that's what I found out as time has gone on. I've really realized that, and it's unfortunate
Yeah.
because, I could have really done so much with my degree earlier on, but I
Mm-hmm.
really trust in the flow of how everything happened because, after I graduated, I had a retail job during school, so I just kept on doing this retail job, which,
Mm-hmm.
my dad was like, okay, so you have this great degree, we spent all this money, and you're working retail, right? But
Yeah.
I kept on going forward, and I said, okay, I don't want to keep on working in retail. And at the time, I responded to a blind box ad in the paper that said, become a management consultant. And
Okay.
all right, and I didn't know what that meant, but I'm like, okay, well, this this sounds good. And so I went. I put on my best suit, all of that. I went on my lunch hour for this interview in downtown Chicago, and 45 minutes later, I came back and I had a job. I was now a management consultant.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? So I
Fast.
felt, I thought, okay, I'm on top of the world now because went from making like $15,000 a year to $25,000 a year. So, and this is in early '80s kind of money.
Yeah.
So, I did that for 3 years, but that was really hard work because I had to go fly out on Sunday night and fly back home on Friday night.
Oh, wow.
And right. And so I was on the road every week, you know, flying into a different city on Sunday night, getting a rental car, driving to some hotel in the dark, and then in the morning going to some manufacturing plant and meeting all these people and sort of doing my work there. So it was really it was I sort of call that my walking MBA.
What what did that job look like? What type of things did you do?
I did a lot of time and motion studies. So ironically, I was using my psychology degree,
Yeah.
um, and I also interviewed supervisors, managers to find out what exactly they did all day because we were trying to determine where the company hired us to find out where the waste was in the organization where they were losing
Mhm.
money, not
Yeah.
necessarily in the people part, but just in where it just wasn't efficient within the organization.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot about how to talk with people, how to um, really be patient with them as they explained everything they did. I recorded all of that, and then we looked at, okay, there's a lot of duplication here, or there's a lot of wasted time here. It really taught me a lot about organizations. It taught me a lot about just how people approach their jobs.
Yeah.
I sat down with one man and I was assigned to him for the day. I'll never forget it. And I said, okay, so I'm just going to shadow you for the day. And he says, okay, well, the first thing I do is go get coffee and the paper. And I'm like, okay, so this is like 8:30. This is like starting time.
Yeah.
And so he gets his coffee and the paper. I said, okay, so what happens next? He's like, I come back to my desk and I read the paper. And I'm like, okay. And I said, is that part of your job? He's like, well, not really. It's just what I do. I'm like, oh my gosh. So that was just, I was like, of course, I recorded all of that, because that was my
Yeah.
job to do that. But I'm like, this is not good. But I think that's how a lot of people were approaching their jobs at that time. This is the mid '80s, and
Yeah.
there were a lot of people who were used to these very patriarchal companies, which this one was, where I was working at the time. They were just used to they were going to be there for life, and
Right.
so they didn't have to worry. They felt so
Yeah.
it was amazing because I traveled all over the country. I went to all these different manufacturing plants primarily. And so I worked in offices. I worked out in the plant on the shop floor. So I learned so much. Um, so I really enjoyed it a lot, but I was getting burned out.
Yeah.
It was just too much work. I saw myself kind of getting old before my eyes.
Right. And all that travel too must have taken a toll.
It really did. There was a lot of stress involved with that. Looking back on it, I'm glad I was younger at the time to be able to do that. Would I want to do that today? Probably not. But
Yeah.
just the stress of traveling, sometimes throughout the week, I would have to travel to a different city, either driving there or flying there. So it was just
Yeah.
a lot of work, a lot of energy out. So, after that, I said, okay, I'm tired of doing this. It's too much. And so I found a job in outside sales, selling training products to manufacturers. So
Oh,
again, I was doing something that I was familiar with. I was working in training where, I was sort of teaching people And but again, it was a lot of travel. And I did that. I worked in outside sales. So that was a whole nother thing to learn. This is sort of the thing where there's not a school like go to school and learn how to be an outside salesperson. It's just like you have to hit the ground running
Yeah, you just learn
and
on the job.
learn on the job. Right. And I think for a lot of people, it's either you kind of got it or you don't. You
Right.
can do that or it's just not suited for you. And luckily, I was suited well for it, and I had those 3 years of experience already, experiences where I had gone and met all of these people, cold calls, kind of walking in, like introducing, here I am, and this is what I can do. So I did the outside sales, and then with my product line, I was promoted to the director of my product line. So
Nice.
right. So I became director of marketing for this product line that I had been selling, which was, that was incredible. I thought, okay, this is what I should be doing, but I wasn't happy at all. I mean, I was really not fulfilled. I was making more money than I'd ever made before, but I
Hmm.
was really feeling just kind of empty, that I was just going through the motions. And what I see now is just how many times I think we get seduced by the money or the position
Yeah.
or the title.
Right.
Uh,
Even
right,
even just the idea of a promotion, it sounds like that's what we're supposed to be doing.
right. Yeah, I thought, okay, this is what I should be doing. I'm following this track of advancing, and sort of look at me. But
Hmm.
inside, I was not happy at all. And so divine providence came in the form of, my VP came to me and he said, so you need to, we're having a layoff, which I knew was happening. He said, you need to let go of 5 people, which was my entire staff.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that was a shock to me that everybody was going to be going. And it also meant that I
You
was
would
going to
have
have
to
to do all of their work,
do.
right?
Right.
So I'm like, this is not going to be fun. So I had, letting go people is probably the hardest thing to do as a manager. And the day before, um, we sort of knew that the layoffs were coming. And the day before, this gal came to me and she said, my partner and I are about to buy a house, and we're signing all of the mortgage paperwork tomorrow morning. Should I do it?
Oh,
And, I was legally obligated that I could not say anything. And I said, I really, I can't tell you. And so, of course, the next morning comes around, I have to let her go.
oh,
I know. I mean,
it's devastating.
it was devastating. It was probably one of the hardest things I had to do as a manager ever.
Yeah.
And I just apologized to her. And I mean, luckily she understood, but that was agonizing to do that. So,
Yeah.
you know, let all my staff go. Then the next week, anybody who's worked in a company where staff has been let go, especially a big layoff like that, it's like walking in a morgue.
Yeah.
It is such a difficult environment to be in, because there's this, pallor of grief and loss that just envelops the whole place. So the next
Hmm.
week, we're all kind of the walking wounded, those of us who survived, quote unquote, that layoff. And then the following Friday or the following Thursday, my VP comes to me again. He said, I just left the executive floor. We had a meeting. I'm going to have to let you go now. And I was
Oh,
like, what? you
they
know?
just made you do all that? Oh my God.
Right. And so I was like, wow. So I remember clear as day. I was sitting in that meeting with him. I saw like all this stuff sort of flash before me. And I remember looking at him, and he was still talking to me about the why, and he was sorry and all this stuff. And I just said, you know what? Thank you. I said, because I wasn't really looking forward to doing all of this work that I was going to have to do because all my staff was gone.
Hmm.
And I said, I think it's just time for me to go anyway. So I don't know how I got that inspiration to actually thank him for that.
Right.
But I think part of me just felt so relieved,
Yeah, it was your
but
time to
I didn't
go.
want to, yeah, I didn't want to admit it, so it was one of those blessings in disguise.
Yeah.
And then after that, I started doing marketing consulting on my own for, contacts that I had in the industry. And then I was like, okay, I'm not fulfilled. This is not, I was like 36 at the time. I was like,
Hmm.
I don't want to do marketing stuff the rest of my life. And I was like, what do I really want? And I'm like, I really miss all the psychology, education, training. Um, and so I went and I talked with a bunch of folks who were counselors, therapists, who were psychologists. And I understood, I had a better understanding then of the track of
Yeah.
what I could do. And that's when I went back, I committed to myself and I went back and started my master's program. And I took one class at a time because that's what I could afford because I didn't want to come out of my master's program with any debt.
Yeah.
And so I just took one class at a time at night. And, I my cohort that I was with, I wasn't able to track with them because they were on a 2-year plan and I was on a 3-year plan because I was going to take longer.
Right.
But someone told me, I was sort of complaining about, oh my gosh, it's going to take me 3 years. And when you're in something like that, it just feels 3 years feels like forever,
Forever. Yeah.
right? But she said, the time is going to go by anyway. You might as well be doing something you enjoy.
Yeah.
And that opened up that experience for me, and I could just relax within the experience then.
That's good advice.
Yeah, that was phenomenal because that helped put it all into perspective, you
Right.
know, and it allowed me to enjoy the experience rather than, saying, oh, I should be, looking at it as far as a lack or that I'm sort of missing something. That I was just,
Right.
okay, this is going to be my experience of going through this.
And difference not always worse.
That's right. That's right. And so I made that experience my own. And because I was just taking one class at a time, I got straight A's through my entire master's program, which was a great sort of validation for me.
Yeah.
That felt great. And then my internship, I worked at an addiction counseling center. They wanted to hire me, but I really wanted to be more mental health. And so I got a job working at a mental health clinic. Um, and so here I went from doing all this marketing stuff, and now I'm a supervisor therapist at a free mental health clinic, making like $23,000 a year.
Wow.
I know,
Oh,
I, I know. So the contrast was huge,
right.
but it was also the commitment I was making to myself and to my future,
And more
and
fulfilling.
much more fulfilling. And I was fortunate that I have a partner who was very supportive of me, and we made it work with our finances and all of that. But it was a sacrifice. We had to forego some plans we had to build a house, and
Mhm.
it was. But we were investing in my future. So it from when I started at the clinic to when I left the clinic to once I had all my hours in I had taken my licensure exams, and I got out on my own. It took me 7 years from
Wow.
when I started. Let me rephrase that. From when I started my master's program to when I was in private practice, it took me 7 years.
Wow. And so it must have been extremely frightening to kind of make that investment in your future, especially with such a long kind of time commitment. How did you feel making that decision? What kind of thoughts, what kind of decisions went into deciding to go that route?
I knew it was something I had to do because once I had made the commitment to go back to school, it was like everything then shifted, that became the focus, that became the drive, that I was plugging into my passion.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I had plugged into my passion, I'd sort of come full circle because, I had graduated with that degree from psychology from Loyola, hadn't
Yeah.
done, anything with it. And then I came back and I'm like, well, I'm plugging right back into, what was always my desire.
Yeah, which should have been your main focus.
Which should, we could say it should have been my main focus, but looking back on it, if you think about all the different experiences I had in management consulting and outside sales and corporate life, all of that, prepared me to be in private practice working with all of these folks who are miserable in their jobs in corporate America
Right.
because I walked it with them,
Yeah, you
in a
understand
past.
it.
I understood it. Yeah, I had walked it in a past life, and so I was like, yeah, I get it. I know what it's like to let go people, and I know what it's like to feel like you're on top of the world because of just what you're making or just because of your title, but inside you're not fulfilled. So
Yeah.
ironically, all of that contributed to this cumulative knowledge that I was walking with, you know, now as a therapist. So I believe that everything happens for a reason. That when I look back on that path, if I had gone into, let's say, you know, if I had become a social worker after I graduated, I don't know if I would have really felt fulfilled in my life. I kind of wonder if I would have felt, gosh, I'm missing something. Who knows?
And it's kind of beneficial to learn what you don't want to do or what you're not happy in as well, because now you can be completely satisfied in what you're doing, or at least mostly satisfied, knowing that you feel more fulfilled now and kind of knowing that difference.
Yeah, to know the difference because I have felt the difference.
Yeah.
And so it's not just an intellectual knowing; it's a visceral, feeling inside of me. And I had a student. She was interviewing people about their jobs. She was a high school student. She came to me and she said, "So, do you like your job?" And I said, "Well, really, so I'm a therapist now. She's coming to
Mhm.
me, and I said, "Well, really, it's more than a job to me. It really is who I am." And so I had really, you know, stepped into the embodiment of me. This is who I am. I'm a therapist. I'm a
Yeah.
psychotherapist. So this is, you know, this really embodies me. So it's more than a job.
It's a nice way to put it.
Well,
And
it's really fulfilling.
right.
Mhm.
And earlier you mentioned that when you graduated college, you didn't really know the options you could take within psychology
No,
with your psychology degree. And then after your career in marketing, you came back and you knew more options.
yes.
What kind of changed there? How did you find the available options at that point?
Well, I knew what questions to ask.
Right.
So as a you know, 20, I don't know what I was, 21-year-old, right, student,
Yeah.
right? I didn't know the questions to ask. I was just like, I took everything kind of at face value.
Right.
And so, now as a 35 something year old man, now, okay, now I know the questions to ask. I know, uh, how to go to a guidance counselor and say, tell me about your program. What can I do with this degree? Where can I take it? What is this licensure about? How do I get licensed? So I knew the questions to ask. I
Right.
didn't have that knowledge as a student. And I think that's where a lot of young people, they they graduate and they're like, well, what do I do now? And
Yeah.
so any chance I get to speak to kids in college that are just starting out, and if they're even at all interested in becoming a psychotherapist, I'm like, all right, let me tell you. so, so I just want to, like, I lay out the whole path for them. I'm like, this is how you
Oh,
can do it. This is what it will be like. This is how long it will take you. This is about how much it will cost you. It's like I want to pave the road for them because that's
yeah.
what I didn't have.
And they need it even still, because I come across students. So I teach in the psychology department, and I have a lot of students that want to go into psychotherapy,
Yes,
and they have no idea what to do, where to go. I get a lot of students come through my office that are just like, I'm about to graduate. What am I supposed to do?
right.
And they
Even
just still don't know those questions to ask and kind of how to go about it and what to do.
Right, right. I know it. And so I just anytime I can, I like to talk with them, and I also like to because part of my background, while I was in school, after I graduated high school, I worked at a psychiatric hospital. So I was an orderly in a psychiatric hospital, and so I had learned a lot about sort of institutionalized care
Mm-hmm.
from that experience. And then when I graduated with my master's, and then I needed my hours for my licensure, that's when I was working at the mental health clinic. So here I was seeing, by that time, they had discharged all of these patients from these huge psychiatric, institutions,
Mm-hmm.
and they all were kind of put out, displaced, into the community, and now they were all coming into the community mental health provider clinics. And so I saw, okay, this is the reality. This is how these folks are having to now really navigate the system with mental illness or the comorbidity of with an addiction as well. And so it was tremendous having that early knowledge as a teenager working at a hospital, and now as an adult working, within a mental health clinic. So it really gave me a lot of perspective and a lot of empathy for those folks who were trying to navigate, mental health. And for me as a provider, it helped me understand how to help them.
Mm-hmm. And I
You know,
think we have this perception of mental health treatment as being a difficult job, even just emotionally, kind of getting attached or listening to the stories of what people are going through. Is it difficult for you in that way at all? Is there kind of an emotional toll that's taken in this job? How does
well,
that
I
play
think
out?
that's a good question, and actually I'm asked that a lot because people will
Mhm.
say, I don't know how you do your job.
Right.
I don't know how you listen to all these stories every day, and you must go crazy at night or what. I'm like,
Take it home with you. Yeah.
right. And what I figured out about 5 years ago, that I've listened to over 20,000 hours of people talking. Now it's probably much more than that.
Wow.
Um, and so the biggest advice that I would give someone starting out in their career as a therapist is boundary setting. It really is creating strong boundaries within yourself, as far as my life, and then that's your life. But, one thing that I decided early on was that I didn't want to work with children. I didn't want to specialize in doing child therapy. And the reason was because I was really concerned that I would not be able to have good boundaries, and I would want to rescue all of these kids that were coming in telling me about their horrible, you know, family life.
Right.
And so I was very clear. It's like, I can't do that because I will really lose myself in their stories. And I'm glad that I chose that. So I work with adolescents and adults today. Um,
Okay.
and if someone's story really stays with me, for me personally, what I do is I say a prayer and intention for them, and I trust that they're on their path, that they're walking their path that they need to, just like I've walked my own path.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I manage it. But for the most part, like yesterday, I was on in sessions for 9 hours back to back,
Oh,
and at the end of the day, of course, I'm tired, because that's a lot of energy out. But
yeah.
I'm not really carrying their stories. I've given them homework to do. They have stuff they're working on, and we set up their next appointment.
Okay. And
Yeah.
how has the recent kind of events like COVID-19, and that's obviously changing how you administer mental health, and I'm assuming there's probably an influx of people trying to seek mental health. Has it changed your profession significantly, or just kind of the way that you do it?
It's changed how I do it as far as the access that people have. So,
Mhm.
I can do a Zoom session with them now. I can do just a regular phone call session, or I also see people in my office if they're comfortable doing that, and we
Okay.
follow all the safety protocols for that. Um, what I found is that I'm fortunate in my industry that I can still work, that I can,
Yeah.
that people are able to still have access to mental health care. But what I'm hearing are as this year has gone on, I guess from what people are coming in and talking about is they're really if they've had anxiety before, their anxiety is even worse.
Yeah.
uh, they're able, folks are able to sort of manage their depression okay, but it really is the anxiety that really is spiking a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Right, right. And so what I find is that I have to really be very grounded in myself, even more so today with COVID, with the election, with stuff that's going on in the community. I have to be very grounded in myself and really, have this impartiality and
Hmm.
really just address wherever they're at, whatever their concerns are. They're setting the agenda for the session anyway, but I find that the more that I have to really ground myself even more, center myself even more as far as what I know to be true and who I am and what my values are, so that I don't get sort of lost or spun up with their anxiety, with their fear.
Hmm.
So that's probably what I've had to do more so this year than any other time in my career, is to be more centered and grounded within myself.
Yeah. So I want to go backwards a little bit because you talked about kind of going to graduate school, getting your master's, working in an internship at the mental health clinic. What happens after that stage? Do you immediately kind of go and start your own practice? Do you start with somebody else? What happens once you're done with graduate school and internship?
So once I had gotten my hours in, my supervised hours in, and I was
Mhm.
going to be sitting for my exam, I thought, okay, I don't want to work at the mental health clinic anymore. I really wanted to be in private practice. And so I met a woman who became a very good friend of mine at a training session. And I said, hey, I'm looking to sublet an office. Is there any way when you're not using your office, could I use your office and pay you? I think I paid her $10 an hour to use her office when she wasn't using it.
Okay.
And and then I started um, getting people to come in to see me that way. And sometimes I only saw one or two people a week on my own. So I was still
Hmm.
working at the clinic, and then I was subletting this office. And then, of course, I had my full license, so I was really wanting to be out on my own. And so I figured out how many people I would have to see in order to pay my rent if I had my own office.
Yeah.
So I think it was like 8 people I had to see per week. And so I had gotten up to like 8 or 9 people. I'm like, okay, I think I can do this. But again, like we were saying before, it's a big leap
Yeah.
because I was really having to find this faith and trust in myself that everything was going to be okay. So, looking back on it now, I realize how much I was having to do all this sort of self-talk, this coaching within myself to say this is going to work out. And I think a big thing was for me was I was following my passion. I was doing what I wanted to do and what I felt that I needed to do. And so once I had the 8 or 9 people coming to see me, I told the clinic, I said, okay, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to do this. And everybody I worked with, they knew that that's what I wanted to do anyway. And they
Hmm.
were very supportive. But still, I'll never forget like walking into my new office that I was getting all set up. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm really doing this.
That
It,
must
it,
be an exciting time.
it's exciting, but it's scary at the same time. It's like,
Right.
wow, okay. I'm I'm doing this. What is this going to be like? Is this going to be okay? And again, it's where I had to do all of this, self-regulation, where I had to just, help myself through that experience.
So that must have been again a super exciting time to kind of start and kind of navigate starting your own business. How
Yeah.
did you get it to grow? How did you end up kind of getting more patients to come in to see you? How does that part of the job work? Do you become more
So
like going back to your business roots?
that's exactly right. And so that's the irony of it is that now I had all of this marketing experience from before. I had
Right.
all this business experience. And so I'm like, okay, well, how do I market myself? And so Psychology Today, I saw that I could put a profile up there. And then
Mhm.
I literally went around to every psychiatrist in town. I went back to my contacts at the clinic, the psychiatrist I knew from there, and I put these flyers together. I put this whole like package together as far as what I can help your patients with, what I'm working on, and then I started putting workshops together. So I just sort of invented these workshops where I would teach meditation techniques, or I would talk about codependency, or so I was just sort of, inventing these things to talk about, and I worked with Chamber of Commerce folks, or I worked with hospitals as far as if they had programs they were putting on, and I did a lot of free stuff. So that's what really helped me the most early on was I went and I gave a lot as far as my time and my knowledge that I had. So I would go into hospitals and do lead meditation workshops for all the nurses and attendants on their lunch hour. And so it took a lot of time and energy for me to do that, but then then they knew who I was. So that's how
Right.
I was getting my name out there. And then I went back to my school that I got my master's from, and I taught a DSM class for 2 semesters, and then I sort of expanded my awareness of who I was, through that outlet as well. So it was a lot of where I was really putting a lot of energy out, not always getting a direct return. But
Hmm.
what I was doing is I was building my name within the community.
Right. So, with all this experience, would you say it's beneficial for somebody who wants to go into psychotherapy route, especially if they want to open their own practice, to get some business experience?
Well, I think it helps because, when I have a number of friends of mine who are physicians,
Hmm.
and of course I know a lot of psychotherapists and people in the medical profession, and all of us talk about how we did not learn how to run our business in school.
Yeah.
All of us talk about that there are no classes on, oh, so you want to have a private practice, this is what you do. There's no information out there. So we all had to learn on our own. So I
Hmm.
think someone starting out, I would highly recommend you meeting with someone who's been doing this for a while and learn, ask them, okay, how did you do this? How did you start out? Just like everything that I'm saying today. You know,
Right.
what what do you recommend I do? And really use them as a mentor, as a guide to help show you, be the way shower for you.
And do you recommend reaching out to just one person or kind of as many people as you can
As
find?
many people as you can. That's a good
Yeah.
point, because what I'm saying. So how I did it worked for me, but
Hmm.
someone else might have followed a very different path and that worked for them. And so from each of us, I think a person starting out is going to be hearing, okay, this is what Robert did, this is what this other person did, what do I think is going to work for me? So the more people you talk to, and today there are a lot of podcasts where that you can listen to as far as how to start out a practice, how to begin, creating, building a practice, building your own business. There are more books available, so there's more information available today than there ever was before, as
Yeah.
well as a lot of marketing tools and just business tools that you can use to make your practice work for you.
So usually kind of at the end, because we're coming up on time, I usually ask if you had kind of one major piece of advice to give somebody starting out in this career, what would that be?
Starting out in going into counseling, going into psychotherapy.
Exactly.
So I think that for going into psychotherapy or going into really any um, new adventure that you're going to be doing, check with your gut, check in with yourself, and see if this is your passion. Does this really spark joy within you? Do you get excited about it? Does it do you feel motivated? Do you feel like you're bringing in um, this sort of infinite sort of wisdom and creativity? Are you really excited about it? So if you can answer yes, these are all things that I'm excited about, that I really want to do. Yes, there are some unknowns. I don't know about that, but this is what's really exciting for me. Then you're in the ballpark. You really are lining up with what your core values are, as well as what your path, what you have to share with others. And the other thing I think I want to mention is that we all have to be stubborn about what we want to go after in life.
Hmm.
We have to have a passion about it. So I just wrote a book, Healing Your Lost Inner Child, and I started that last December and writing it, and then I that sort of, this is what I did during COVID, is that I wrote this book, and so it yeah, I got it produced, and got up on Amazon in August. And
Wow.
right, so I had to be really stubborn about this, really passionate about writing that book, because I would write in the morning, get all get all this stuff, you know, out there, and then I would go in and then do my psychotherapy work. So it was like having two full-time jobs,
Absolutely.
right? But it was so worth it. And talk about something that has been huge for me was, just that whole process of learning how to, like, I didn't know anything about writing a book. I just knew that I had this information that I wanted to get out about a practice, a process that I went through myself personally, and then I take my patients through in my practice. And so I started writing, getting all this information out and sort of lining it up. But I still needed an editor. I still needed people to help me get it to Amazon. But I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so I was at a conference last January, and I ran into these gals. We were on a break, and we were talking about what we were doing. And this one gal said, "Oh, well, my friend, she just wrote a book and she loved her editor." I'm like, I need her name. I need, how do I contact her? So I, you know, I got in contact with her. I got the editor's name, and then the editor then put me in contact with a book designer, a book marketer, all of these women who helped me. I call them my goddesses because they really then helped me bring my book to market. But boy, that was a lot of work. But I'm just so proud. I feel humbled and proud from the whole experience. But it took a lot of determination for me to get that done, just like it took the same determination for me to go back to school, to get my degree, and to start working to getting towards my private practice. So it is about determination, sticking to what your passion is, and bringing that into your life.
Yeah, and that's a pretty quick turnaround for a book. I know several people who have written books, and they usually say it takes 2 to 3 years to write a book.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
it was a very fast turnaround. There were parts of sections of the book that I had written before, but they weren't really pulled together. And then last December, I just, I was like, if I'm going to do it, I need to do that now. I need to
Mhm.
make this happen. And so I just buckled down and started writing, and it just flowed. I was in that zone, and it just flowed. And I'm very, very thankful that I sort of took that spark of inspiration. And that's probably is the other thing for folks to really pay attention to internally is when you have a spark of inspiration, pay attention to that, because
Mhm.
that's your higher self coming through, that saying, here's an opportunity. And I think throughout life we're giving those sparks. We have access to that spark of inspiration. Sometimes we grab it, sometimes we ignore it, but that really is a window, a doorway of opportunity that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah. And then do you have any advice for somebody who's doing that kind of searching about whether they're passionate about it and have that excitement? What if they find that they don't have the excitement in that job, kind of like you did when you were in marketing? Do you have any advice for how to search in new directions?
Yes, and I have a lot of people who will come to see me who they're worked at these companies for 10 or 15 years. They are not fulfilled. They're in relationships, or they have children, they have obligations, and they feel really trapped.
Yeah.
And of course, I have so much compassion and empathy for them because I was where they're at, and I know that feeling. And how I counsel people through that experience is, okay, so you can't really uh, change your job, or you can't really afford to go back to school. But there are things that you can control. So you can control your attitude, you can control your perspective, You can control what you're doing outside of work. And so that's what we begin to look at. Look at those things that you can control instead of feeling so defeated and the glass is half empty. It's like, no, there's opportunity here. If
Mhm.
if you're walking into work every day, begrudgingly and unhappy, then that's going to set the tone for the whole day. It's
Yeah.
it's not about being, sort of, you know, ignoring uh, that you're not happy, but it's saying, I can I can go through this experience. I can create. I'm going through this experience, and how do I want to do that? That I'm in charge of that. No one else is in charge of that. So how do I want to experience this?
That's great advice.
Well, it's thank you. But it's looking at what we can control, and knowing that we do have a lot of control over our life, even though sometimes we feel kind of trapped.
I think it gets pretty easy to feel like you don't have any control when you're only focusing on kind of those more negative aspects of what's going on.
Yep. And that's, I think, the advantage of going and talking with someone like a counselor or a therapist, because we're not sort of lost in that. We can
Yeah.
have perspective on it, so we can be like, well, let's look at the other side of this coin. Let's look at all the good things that you are doing, or let's look at all the opportunities you do have. And so it really is about refocusing, shifting, sort of pivoting to a new perspective on your life that's right there in front of you. But if we tend to always be looking down and only seeing what we're lacking, then that's going to create our sense of our reality.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of this advice. We're definitely going to put a link to your book on Amazon, on our social media. Or is there anywhere else that our listeners can find you?
Sure. So thank you for the link on Amazon. For the
Yeah.
book is titled Healing Your Lost Inner Child. And folks can also find me on my website, which is theartofpracticalwisdom.com.
Oh,
And
that's a
so
nice
on the
name.
website, thank you. So I created part of in designing the book and producing the book was marketing the book. And so I created that website just for the book, just for future workshops I want to do. So it was one of those things. Okay, I've never done this before, so it was like, okay, this is what I have to do. So it's the artofpracticalwisdom.com.
Great. And then again, we'll put links to all of that on our social media for anybody that wants to check it out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Career Journey Podcast. Head over to our website at careerjourneypodcast.com for more information and the latest episodes. See you next time.